All right, good evening, everyone. Welcome. Thank you very much. Thank you so very much for coming and joining us and making this wonderful group possible. We are sponsored by A.B. Spry, that all, in the schus of dedicating the Bavas, all his children should be healthy Bavas, and by Michal Avram, with the wish for everybody to finish Shas many times over. We welcome in Dr. Block and Aaron Swade and Saba. We welcome in Dr. Guy, Baruch Ian, Mark Frankel, Mel Zachter, Irving Fishbaum, Shimon Klein, Yitzi Fuchs, Shalom Fogel, Marshall Castle, Stephen Holtzman, Moshe Lehman, Abe Arbach, Shimon Deer, Yitzi Muller, Rabbi Kranz. Here in Shul we have Gedalia Engel, Avram, Reb Kramer, Reb Michal Avram, and Ruvain Shanet holding down the fort here. And Ruvain Palak is just joining us now, expecting Berish to join us any minute now from his perch in Muncie. We are holding on Daf Yud Testament Bays, 5 lines from the bottom at the 2 dots. We just have the last vestiges of the Shtar Sugya. So, give it the final, push to get over this, which was a very difficult Sugya. I remember talking to my son-in-law, my Adam Reb Avi, my youngest son-in-law, Reb Avi Ingber, who's a tremendous Talmud Chacham. He says, they all call me Tati. Tati, we work months on the sugya of shtaris. It's a shver sugya. Ton Rabbanan. So Matzah Shaver, Mark has the habit of picking up things these days, and he finds a receipt that it looks like it could have been given by a wife to her husband, that he paid her the ksuva, and she gave him a receipt. But we don't know who dropped it. We don't know if the wife had it and she didn't get the ksuva yet, or that the husband dropped it and he already paid out the ksuva. So, Tan Rabbanan, Matzah Shaver, if Mark finds the receipt, Bizman she'isha maida, if the woman admits, yes, he paid me the ksuva, yazal about, we could return it to the husband. Eino isha maida, if the woman doesn't admit, she says that the husband didn't pay her the ksuva yet, lo yazal lo lezev lo lezev. Mark doesn't return it to either of them. But what we're interested is in the place where we're interested. Let's see if we could mute everybody here. Again, Shelley looks like he's on a roller coaster.
Life is a roller coaster. It is. That's why it looks that way.
So what we're interested over here is Bizman she'isha maida, that where the woman says, yes, my husband did pay me the ksuva, you could give him back the receipt. Mihos yarzul about. We could give it back to the husband and fine. But here's the problem. And again, the problem is the dating, as we've been having the whole time. You see, a woman has the right to sell futures of her ksuva. That means that, she has to find a speculator. Let's look around the room. Okay, Marshall. So Marshall, I just picked that out of the hat. It could have been anybody. But hearty appetite, Marshall.
Thank you. I'm speculating on my dinner right now.
Right. Well, after taking advantage of these women, we would understand that you would have what to eat. Now, yeah. So anyway, here's the concern. a woman could sell the toivas hana of her ksuva. What does that mean? She's not necessarily getting a ksuva. If her husband never divorces her, and she predeceases her husband, she would never get a ksuva. And therefore, buying a woman's ksuva ahead of time is a mere speculation. It's a gamble. Right? So let's say if the ksuva was $60,000, maybe he'll pay $25,000 for it. Right? It's a speculation. That's how Marshall makes a living. It's all speculation. Right? That's why he eats franks. But anyway...
These ain't Franks.
Anyway, I saw that. It came out of a dog food.
Alpo, right?
You could afford Alpo?
No, these cheap women I'm dealing with.
Now, anyway, stop interrupting me, Marshall. Anyway, here's the worry. She says, my husband paid me the ksuva already. And they give the husband the receipt. The receipt says that it was paid in Nisan, in the spring. The reality might be that she wrote the receipt in the spring, anticipating the husband would give it to her. But the husband didn't give it to her till the fall, till Tishrei. In the interim, she sold the futures of the ksuva to Marsha. So that really, if he pays her the ksuva in the fall, who should get the ksuva? Marsha. Now she returns the receipt that says the spring. In the spring, Marshall didn't buy the futures yet. He bought it, Erev Shavuos. So it would cause Marshall to be rooked out of the ksuva. That's the concern. Let's see it inside. V'leichish, 3 lines from the bottom of Daf Yud Testament base. V'leichish Dilma ksuva Dilma Kasva, maybe she wrote the receipt, Litain Benisan, that to give it in Nisan. But V'loi Nasna, she didn't give it actually at Tishrei, until Tishrei. So that means that the ksuva wasn't paid out until Tishrei, which means that it should go to Marshall, because Marshall bought the futures for the ksuva. But because V'azla Savanta l'ksuvasa, she went ahead and sold her ksuva b'toivas hana min Nisan at Tishrei, from in between Nisan and Tishrei. She sold the futures to the ksuva on Erev Shavuos. Umapik leili shayver, and then he'll take out the receipt, d'chsiv b'Nisan, v'asam l'mitrach l'kuches, which means, as the Rishonim explain, it comes out that it's depriving Marshall of getting the ksuva that he should really get. Shaloi kedin. Says the Gemara, are you suspicious of this woman using a lie to deprive Marshall of getting the ksuva? If she didn't want Marshall to get the ksuva, there's a very simple way to deprive Marshall from getting the ksuva. Here's an interesting law. Let's say I owe $10,000 to Mel. And Mel sells the paper. That's the legal terminology. Mel sells the paper to Shalom. Mel says, I don't know if I'm going to collect from Rabbi Weiss. Shalom, I'll sell you the IOU for $5. Shalom buys it. The halacha is that after Shalom buys it, Mel could be meichel the debt. Nice guy. Mel could forgive the debt, and then Shalom is up the creek without a paddle, even though he paid $5,000 for the note. Mel could still be Michael the debt. So here also it's the same thing. If the woman doesn't have to lie and play all these devious tricks with the receipt, if she didn't want Marshall to get the ksuva, all she has to do is be Michael the ksuva, be Michael her husband from giving the ksuva. And that's what the Gemara answers. Amar Rabba Shmami Na Isei L'Dishmol. The Amar Shmuel HaMoicher Shtar Chayv L'Chaveiroi. If Mel sells the paper to Shalom, the Chazer Machloi, and he goes ahead and is Michael me, and he says that I don't have to pay him the debt, Machal. Not in Mel's case. But if it was Chatzkel, who I owed the money to, and Chatzkel died, Vafilu Yorish Michael, even the son could be Michael. Abaya says no. Afilu Teimaleh said to Shmuel. The reason why we're not worried that she sold the paper is because she still has the ksuva in her hand. If she sold it to Marshall, then Marshall would have insisted to have the ksuva. She still has the ksuva. That means that she didn't sell it. Rava says that's not a convincing enough argument, because maybe the husband wrote her a second ksuva, and she gave one to Marshall, but she still had a second one. Abaya says that we're not worried about. That's very far-fetched. We're not worried that there's a second ksuva. And now get a load of this. Abaya says there's another reason why we don't have to worry about Marshall. Even if Marshall bought the Toivus Hana on Erev Shavuos, as soon as she wrote a receipt to the husband that her ksuva was paid from Nisan, and witnesses signed it, the witnesses were zoicha in it for the husband. The witnesses were zoicha in it from Nisan. As the Gemara says, Oid Shoiver Bismanoi Tarf. The receipt is binding from the time it was written. Then that means that the husband was bound to give the ksuva from Nisan. Why? Abaya l'tamei the amar be'edav b'chaysamav zachanloi. The witnesses with their signatures already made it binding from Nisan, and therefore it's not available to Marshall, who bought the future for Erev Shavuos, and therefore we don't have to worry about Marshall, and that's why Mark could return the shaver to the husband. Now, in the following cases, Mark could give the documents back. It's much easier. Matzah Igrei Shum. Now, Igrei Shum is a fancy name. Marshall owes me $100,000, and of course, he doesn't pay. I go to court, and the court assesses his car shop. It's worth $100,000. Halavai, right? It's worth $100,000, and the court gives me a document of assessment and the right to take away Marshall's car shop. So if Mark finds that document, he could return it to me. V'igre smozon. Or if there's a document saying that I'm going to support my stepdaughter, so he could return the document to the stepdaughter. Shtar chalitza umiyunin. If there's a document attesting that after Ruvain died, Sarah received chalitza from her brother-in-law, that she should be able to remarry. Or miyunin. There's a document that a girl who was under 12 was married by her brother or mother, which is only rabbinical, and such a marriage she could dissolve by a mere refusal, even without a get. if she issued this refusal in front of 3 people, they give a shtar miyun, that there was such a refusal annulling the marriage, you could return that document to her. Ushtare beirurin. Ushtare beirurin, the Gemara gives 2 definitions of shtare beirurin. One definition is it's the court stenographer's document of the claim of the litigants. You know, there is a rule that once you say something in court, you can't change your story. Kevan shehigid shuvein chayzer umagid. So the court stenographer writes down what your claim is. That's shtarei berurin, shtar of clarification of the position of each litigant. That's one pshat. The other pshat is that in choosing the judges, there was a system that each litigant chose one judge, and then the 2 judges choose the 3rd judge. And this was recorded in Shtarei Beirurin that they shouldn't change and opt for different judges. So if Mark finds this, he could return it. V'kol ma'aseh bezdin, or any act of the court, harizeh yachzer, it could be returned. Now, motzach b'chafisa, if Mark finds an IOU note, now we said an IOU note you normally can't return because we're not sure who dropped it. We're not sure if the creditor dropped it, or he already returned it to the loiva and the debtor dropped it, or the debtor wrote it but he never decided to take the loan, right? So Mark can't. But if it was found in a canteen, in a personal canteen, a deluskama is, it's funny, when we were growing up, my mother would get a kick out of, Saba should tell my mother I mentioned it, when she wanted to feed us. So she had what was called the chachka machka box. Yeah.
It's an onomatopoeia.
Yeah, she had a chachka machka, it is an onomatopoeia. But a chachka machka box where she had all kinds of different things, and she brought it, and we played with it. Now this is a little bit of a chachka machka box for older people. The older people, they had one box where they had all the things that they needed. Right? They had a pen, they had their reading glasses, they had the dentures, they had all in the chachka machka box. So if the promissory note was in someone's chachka machka box, which he lost, right? You know, so if he could identify his chachka machka box, by the way, that's not an art scroll. If you could identify the chachka machka box, or you could identify the canteen, the flask, it's a small flask, personal flask, so then Mark could return it to the one that could identify it.
That's a good idea. I'll buy your mother for a birthday, church mother.
She'll get a kick out of when she hears that I use the term. We should learn for her. Esther Frallo Baschana, she fell and she has pain. Maybe she pulled the muscle in her chest. So
Only that.
Before Shlema.
Amen.
So, what'd you do to her?
Me? She climbed on the walls, that's what happens.
Well, trying to get away from you, I'd run right through them, yeah.
Okay, now.
Before Shlema door.
After everybody's like you.
Now. Say chas v'shalom.
You were on my side.
Tachrich
He's down over the fuller.
Tachrich shel shtoros, if it's a roll of shtoros, or aguday shel shtoros, or a bundle of shtoros, harizeh yachzer, Mark could return it. Now the Gemara is going to explain that there's 2 identifications. Mark says that he found some shtoros, and the person identifies it by number, that it was 3, and he also identifies how it was rolled up. As we'll see in the Gemara, there are different ways to roll up shtaros. V'kama agudah shel shtaros, how many? So the Mishnah says, shloisha kshurin zeh b'zeh, 3 tied one with another. Now, Reb Shimon Gamliel Eimer, echad aloiva mishloisha, If it's one person, Marshall, who borrowed from three people, he borrowed from Mark, he borrowed from Mel, and he borrowed from Shelley, so then it's likely, who do you think dropped it? Marshall. Then, Yazel L'Loiva. Shloisha Lovin Min Echad, if it's three people that borrowed from one person, Shelley, Stephen, and Elliot borrowed from Mel, so then Yazel L'Melva. Then it's likely that Mel dropped it, and therefore we return it to Mel. Let's say that Baruch found a document amongst his documents. Now, it says that Shelley owes money to Reuven. And he doesn't know why, he doesn't remember why he has the document. Does he have the document because Shelley didn't get paid yet from Reuven, and Shelley asked him to hold it for him? Or maybe Reuven paid half of it, and he's holding the document in escrow until Reuven pays the rest. So then, since he doesn't know why he has it, now let's say, listen to this, Baruch has a document saying that Dr. Guy owes him $1,000. But he has a receipt that Dr. Guy paid it. Im yeshimam simpoinus, if he has a receipt that Dr. Guy paid it, yasa mashib is simpoinus. He has to follow that. Now that's strange, because if Dr. Guy paid it, then Dr. Guy should have the receipt, not Baruch. And logic would be that Baruch just prepared the receipt for when Dr. Guy would pay it. So the Gemara will say that when do we say that he has to follow this? It's only if he finds the receipt in his torn shtaris file. He has a file of things that were already taken care of. And he finds the receipt in the taken care of pile, then he has to follow that, well, Dr. Guy already took care of it. Otherwise, why is it in that file? Now, first of all, the Gemara defines my story berurin, as I told you. What does it mean, these documents of clarification? Over here, in Bavel, they interpreted shtori tainosa, the recordings of the claims of the litigants, like I explained to you. Rabbi Yirmiyah, no, it was the choice of the judges. One litigant chooses one judge, and the other litigant chooses the other judge, and the two judges choose the third judge. Or any other act of the court, Mar could return. How Gita? There was a get. This is a chazara. We learned this already. I was going to add a little bit of a flavor to it, but we already learned this. How Gita d'ishtakach beidina de Rav Huna? There was a get that was found in the court of Rav Huna. Daviksiv be b'shvirei masa, that it took place. It was given in the city of Shvirei, the Al-Rochis Nara, that was on the bank of the river Rochis. Now the shtar had, the husband was Yosef ben Shimon. And even though the Bezdin was a place that shyoros mitzuyos, that there's a lot of traffic, even though there was a lot of traffic, but there were no two Yosef ben Shimons in Shvirei. So l'chayra, he should be able to give him the get. Amar Rav Huna, so Rav Huna says, no, we can't do that because chayshinon Lishnei Shvirei. Maybe there's another town, Shvirei, on the banks of Rachis Nara, and in that other town there is a Yosef ben Shimon. So Amalei Rav Chisda Rabba, Rav Chisda said to Rabba, Poik Ayin, look into this. Rav Huna is going to ask you to prove the psak on this case. Nafik Dok ve'eshkach, he went out, he looked into it. The Tanan, Kol Maisei Bezdin, any act of the court, like a get, Harizeh Yalza, you're allowed to return. And as Rashi says, that since there isn't two Yosef ben Shimons in Shvirei, to just suspect that there's an unknown other city of Shvirei, we're not worried about that. So Amalei Rav Amram l'Rabba, so Rav Amram said to Rabba, Heichi Pashit Mar Isura Mimamayna. How could the master resolve a case of get, which is a case of Issa v'heter? You want to be mater and Ashes Ish, a married woman to the world. How could you learn that out from a star of financial? A Maisa Bezdin is a document of only financial consequences, and you can learn out get, which is more serious. It's an Isser of Ashes Ish from just a financial document. Amalei, so he answered him, Tarda. Tarda is like one whose mind is not focusing. Shtorei chalitza miyunin tanan. The Mishnah also says examples of Issa v'heter, a star that talks about chalitza, which allows a woman to marry l'shuk and not be overly siya ishes ameitz achutz l'ishzar, and miyunin, which frees the young girl to marry. Those are shtarei Isser. So after this give and take, Poka Arza de Beirav, a very scary thing happened. The central beam of the yeshiva, the cedar beam of the yeshiva, cracked. It was very frightening. So Mar Amma Mishum Lasoididi, Rav Amram said it was because to defend my honor, because Rabbah says it was to defend my honor because Rav Amram challenged me that I was making a wrong comparison. While Marama Mishum Leisi Didi Paka, it was to defend my honor because he called me a tarda. He called me that I wasn't focused. So the Gemara points out that we have to be very, very careful of our sensitivities, especially to great people. As I was saying, especially to people. Now, were you just like clearing your throat from some dust?
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah, right. I want to apologize. I've been working on the filtration system for this year, but it's not working so well. The matzah b'chafisa ibedluskama. If Mark found an IOU note, which normally you wouldn't return because you're not sure who dropped it, but he found it in the chafisa or the dluskama, and the person identified it, so he could return it. Now, my chafisa, what's a chafisa? Amar Rabba Babachana, chemes ketana, a small flask, a small canteen. My deluskama, what's a deluskama? Amar Rabba Babachana, Amar Rabba Bar Shmuel, tlika desabe. It's the box that older people keep all their immediate necessities so that they could find it in one place. Or, as I said, a tchotchke-matchke box. Now, somebody's going to write that down on the side of the Gemara, and in 7.5 years, they're going to come to me and say, why didn't you translate it a tchotchke-matchke box? Don't worry.
Spell that.
Don't worry, I will. So anyway,
Something you forget, actually.
right. Why, is there anybody here that remembers? Ruvain, do you remember me saying that before?
Yes, I do.
Yes, you do. Very good.
You say that last night.
I'm listening over 30 years to your share. That's the first time I heard it.
Yeah, I know.
He remembers hearing it.
I know.
It may have been in a different context. Because if I heard this, I might buy his mother birthday present. Touch the much goodbye.
I heard the last cycle around. I remember this.
Oh, you do remember. You do remember. Okay, good. Harrison Kletzel is joining us. Jeffrey Nyman, Richard Rosenzweig. Okay, now. Again, Rabbi Isai, I just want to remind everybody, we know it now, so just that, sometimes chas v'shalom, something happens, you miss a night. I don't want you to not know the schedule coming up. Tomorrow night is regular time, followed by a great Megillas Esther shir. And then Thursday night, which is Tanis Esther, sometimes I try to shtup the shir in between Mincha and Ma'ariv, but it's not a good idea because it could work out over here in my Agudah Fairways, but you're not going to be able to change your Mincha Ma'ariv schedules where you are. So we're going to do the shir Thursday night at 9:15, giving you enough time. The Tanis is over, 50 minutes is 8 o'clock, so you could have a whole repast, he could have his penny alavatka, and Mark could have his lamb chops, and everybody could have what they want. Baruch could have his French toast, and shir will be at 9:15. The big challenge, which there's nothing I could do about it. The shir Matzah Shabbos is at 10:30. There's no other way. We're having here, which is late. We're having Megillah here at 8:45, about 20 minutes after 72. And afterward, I'm noig to have a Suda. That's what it says. You're supposed to have a Mishta Ksas. And especially, this is also a schus of a Malava Malka. So it's, an important Suda. By the way, it's a very big minig to have zaroinim, seeds. You should prepare to have in the house seeds. You want to have sunflower seeds. You want to have pepitas, the pumpkin seeds, which is also supposed to be very good for the prostate. In some places, they really say that it's good for the prostate. The pumpkin seeds. Certain countries, the doctors recommend it. It is like it's a number one treatment. But anyway, it's Esther and Daniel both subsisted on zaroinim. I have a minig that I put the seeds on the table in a silver dish because it's a minig. Hamantashin are not brought down in Shulchan Aruch, but Zarainim are brought down in Shulchan Aruch. That's a very important minig. But anyway, so shir on Matzah Shabbos is 10:30. So try to take a nap on Shabbos and make sure to come. It's really a big thing. We're serving drinks, coffee. Two daf, yeah, two daf. But it's El Metzias, so it's a little easier. Hashem was kind that it wasn't Ezel Neshech or Azav. Hashem was kind to me. The truth of the matter is, Rabbi Isai, if I'd be smart, I'm not so smart. If I'd be smart, next week I would do 2 blot every night to get ahead so that when we come to Ezel Neshech and Azav, we could take our time. But I'm not so smart. But anyway, says the Gemara weiter. Tachrich shel shtaros or yaguda shel shtaros. So the Gemara now wants to know, here Mark finds this either roll of documents or a bundle of documents. They belong to Mel. How does Mel identify them? So Tana Rabbanan, Kamahu Tachrich shel shtaros. How much is a roll of shtaros? Shloisha kruchin zebezeh. 3 wrapped one in another. V'kamihi agudah shel shtaros. And what's a bundle of shtaros? Shloisha kshurin zebezeh. 3 tied to one another. So the Gemara thinks that the siman that Mel gives to Mark is what type of a knot it was. Was it a sailor's knot? Was it a camper's knot? There's different types of knots. Shmami not kesher siman, that the type of knot is a siman. Says the Gemara, no. Hatani Rabbi Chia shloisha kruchin zebezeh. They're wrapped one in the other. That's the siman. So the Gemara says, well, but then ihochi hainu tachrich. Then that's the same thing as a roll of shtaros. They're wrapped one another. So here the Gemara says there's 2 ways to wrap it. I could take one shtar, and I take one of the shtaros, and I wrap that shtar. I wrap it up, and then I wrap the next one on top of that, and the next one on top of that. That's one way to wrap it. Or the other way to wrap it is I take all 3 shtaros, put them on top of each other, and then wrap them together. So there's different ways of wrapping it. And that's one of the simanim. Says the Gemara, Tachrich kol chad v'chad b'roish d'chad, right? Which means that you wrap one up, and then you wrap the second one on top of that, and the third one on top of that. Aguda, the aguda is the ramu adadi. You put all 3 flat and then wrap them up. So the Gemara says, "My machris." What does he announce? Minyan. He says, "I found 3 shtaros." Says the Gemara, if that's the case, then why does it say 3? It could even be 2. Ma'ayir tlasa afilu train nami. Rather, the number is part of the siman. Elikida Amar Ravina Tiva Machris, like Ravina is going to say in Eilu Metzias, he announces he found coins, and you got to give the number. Hachanami Shtore Machris, he announced he found shtaros. Now, since he said in the plural, if the person says 2, that's not a good siman, because of course shtaros plural is going to be 2. Rather, one of the simanim that Mel gives is it was 3. And the other siman that he gives is how it's wrapped. Now, Reb Shimon Gamliel Eimer, Echad Aleiva Mishloisha, if Mark finds 3 shtaros, and it says that Marshall took a loan from Mel, Shimon, and Shalom, Yazal Aleiva, we return it to Marshall, because obviously he dropped it. It says he took a loan from all 3 of them. Because if it was Mel and Shimon and Shalom, what's all 3 shtaros doing together? My boy Gabi Hadadi, what are they doing together? Mel should have 1 shtar, and Shimon should have 1 shtar, and Shalom should have 1 shtar. Says the Gemara, but Dilma Likiyuminu Ozlek. Maybe what happened is that they were going to get it certified. And says the Gemara, and they sent a courier to get all 3 shtaros certified, and it fell from the courier. Says the Gemara, the Mekaime, it's already certified. Says the Gemara, but maybe it fell from the cipher. Dilma miyoda the cipher nafel. Says the Gemara, once a document is certified, you don't leave it by the cipher. You pick it up right away. Once it's a very valuable piece of paper, you don't leave it by the cipher. You make sure to pick it up right away. If, however, the shtar said there's a shtar that Shimon borrowed from Mel, Shalom borrowed from Mel, and Marshall borrowed from Mel, so then we return it to Mel. Yazal Melva. Says the Gemara, the Isal Kedaitach the Loivaninu, because if it fell from the Loiva, what's the 3 shtaros doing? Shalom shtar should be by Shalom, and Shimon should be by Shimon, and Marshall should be by Marshall. My boy Gabi Adadi. Says the Gemara, Dilma lemichtavinu ozlei. Maybe they were going to have the Sefer write it, and the Sefer lost it. In other words, they were going to the Sefer to write the promissory note that Shimon owes money to Mel, and Shalom owes money to Mel, and Marshall, and it fell from the Sefer. Says the Gemara was written by 3 different Sefers. The Ksive B'Tlas Yedei Safrei was written by 3 different scribes. Says the Gemara, V'dilma l'kiyuminu azlei. Maybe they went to certify it. Says the Gemara, the debtor doesn't go to certify it. Mel goes to certify it. Mel is the one that has to collect. The debtors wouldn't be going to certify. Malva Mekayim Shtori, the creditor goes to certify the shtar. Leiva Le Mekayim Shtori. That's even a very odd Havamina. Now here we have the problem of where Baruch finds, it says that Marshall owes him $10,000, but he finds amongst his papers a receipt that Marshall paid up the $10,000. So, im yeshimam simpinus, if he finds the receipt, yasa mashe b'simpinus. He has to follow what it says in the receipt. Now that doesn't make sense. If Marshall paid him the $10,000, then he should give the receipt to Marshall. It's more likely that he prepared the receipt to give it when Marshall paid. And indeed, the Gemara says that's normally the halacha. Amar Rabbi Yirmiyah bar Abba Amar Rav, simply na yoytze mitachas yedei malva, a receipt that's found by the creditor, afal pi shekoseh b'ksav yada, even if it's in Baruch's own handwriting, eino yala kimisachik, it's only mocking Marshall, or puzzle. It doesn't negate the debt. The only time a receipt negates the debt is if it's held by the debtor, if it's held by Marshall. If it's by Baruch, it just means that Baruch wrote the receipt to have it ready when Marshall pays. And like we said, Baruch could laugh Marshall out of the room. I have the receipt. What does it mean? I have the receipt. You have to have the receipt. Don't be ridiculous. Says the Gemara, and loimi boy kasab iksav yad sefer. For sure, it's really nothing if it was written by a scribe, because it means that Baruch was worried that he wouldn't get somebody to write it when Marshall wants to pay, and he found a sefer that was available, so he said, write it for me ahead of time. He got a chance to get the scribe to write it for him ahead of time. Even if Baruch wrote it himself, it's still possible. Savar, he's afraid that maybe Marshall will come right before Shabbos, and Marshall will say, listen, if you don't have a receipt, I'm not paying. And Baruch knows how slippery Marshall could be, right? I don't know if you ever saw a jellyfish, right? So Baruch knows how slippery Marshall could be. So he says, I know if I don't have it ready in advance, Marshall will say, you don't have a receipt, I'm not paying. And there's no time before Shabbos, I'll see you in a year, So el afilu kaseh b'ksav yadei pasel. Why? Savar dilma misrami v'asi ben hashmashas. Maybe Marshall will come right before Shabbos, v'kaparali, and he wants to pay me. De'ilo yehivnale. If I don't give him a receipt, lo yadli zuzeh, he's going to slip away and not give me my money. And therefore, I'm echtov on. I'll write it ahead. Dechi aisili zuzeh, when he has the money for me etinle. So the Gemara says, so that's a very good case that if he has a receipt, it's meaningless. Yet our Mishnah says that if Baruch finds a receipt amongst his papers, he has to follow the receipt, which is contrary to what we just learned. Tnan, im yeshimam simpinus, if there's a receipt, yasa mashe b'simpinus. So therefore you have to learn, like we explained when we learned the Gemara before. You have to learn that it's talking about that Baruch found it in the... Baruch is very, very organized. Especially in Deerfield Beach, he has everything in the sunroom. He has all kinds of files, all kinds of baskets. And in one basket is the taken care of list. And there he has all the documents that are already ripped. And he finds the receipt in the taken care of bin. He found it amongst his torn shtaros. This is the reason why I asked to follow it. Tajma, the Gemara asks, you said that normally if the receipt is by the creditor, it's meaningless. We learned nimtza le'echad bein shtarosav. If Baruch finds amongst his papers shtarei shel Yosef ben Shimon Perua, that the shtar of Yosef ben Shimon is paid up, and he has two Yosef ben Shimons that owe him money, shtarei shneim Perua. Since he doesn't know which one, so they're both paid up. But we said if it's by him, it doesn't mean anything. So here again the Gemara gives the answer. It's found in the taken care of bin. It's found amongst the torn documents. Tajma. Shvua shalei pikadonu abba. If Chatzkel died and Chatzkel's orphans come to collect money from Marshall. They said, you owe our father money. So they have to swear, Shaloi Pikadonu Abba, that our father didn't instruct us that you paid him. V'Shaloi Amalanu Abba, he made no mention of it to us. V'Loi Matzanu Ben Shtarosav Shalaba, and we didn't find amongst our father's papers a receipt. So that would imply, but if we did find a receipt, we have to go back to the receipt. But we just said a receipt by the creditor is meaningless. Rav Safra, what it means is we didn't find it in the to take care of bin. Shenimtza ben shtaris kruin, we didn't find in the taken care of bin that, Marshall, your debt was taken care of. So tomorrow is very exciting. Tomorrow we finish this parak, which I would say that since the start of Brachas, which is more than half of Shas ago, besides Yevamis and besides certain sugyas in Erevin, and besides certain very difficult sugyas in Ksuvas, and besides Mesechtes Yushalmi Shkalim, this was one of the hardest prakim since the start of Shas. Not that I'm a big expert, but this was a. And Michal Avram, I'm putting this in perspective for you. You started at a very challenging time. This is a very challenging Masechta. If you, it's interesting, Rabbi Isai. For those of you that have power benching, we are assiduously.
Yes.
Assiduously. We are assiduously working to reprint power benching. But in one of the haskamas that I got for power benching was from Rabbi Yisrael Reisman, who is a childhood friend of mine. And I asked him for haskama. He didn't want to give it. He says, what am I giving to a colleague haskama? But I wanted haskama. And he writes in the haskama that he doesn't feel comfortable writing the haskama. So I wrote on the bottom a PS, which my publisher said, you really want to print this? And I said, absolutely. I wrote on the bottom, I wrote an asterisk, and I said that when I learn Ezo Neshech, which is all about ribbis, I have a hard time understanding the simple pshat about ribbis. And Rav Yisrael Reisman wrote a whole sefer about ribbis. So, it just gives you an idea of who he is. Should be gesund. Anyway, so we're now going to learn the Mishnah Yomis. It's great to have everybody here.
Good night.
We hope Mommy feels better. Good night.
Yeah, I'm gonna tell her I'm gonna get a tchotchke master.
Okay.
Maybe it should,
It has to be a fancy one, maybe made out of silver.
fake silver.